So President Biden under pressure to speak out about the chaos spreading on U.S. campuses and also accusations of discrimination against Jewish students. And he finally did so today. Watch.
Destroying property is not a peaceful protest. It's against the law. Vandalism, trespassing, breaking windows, shutting down campuses, forcing the cancellation of classes and graduations. None of this is a peaceful protest. Threatening people, intimidating people, instilling fear in people is not a peaceful protest. It's against the law.
And watch this, two groups of protesters facing off against each other yesterday at the University of Alabama in Tuscaloosa. And at one point, both sides, the pro-Israel supporters and the pro-Palestinian supporters, started chanting this. So with that, let's bring in Marc Thiessen, former chief speechwriter for President George W. Bush, American Enterprise Institute senior fellow and Washington Post columnist, and Leslie Marshall, Democratic strategist. Both are Fox News contributors. Great to have both of you here today. Thanks so much for joining us. You know, Leslie, I want to get your thoughts on, we're talking about protests. I think you can hear the protests that we're seeing here. I should point out that these folks are in a sort of cordoned off area where they're allowed to protest. It's probably about 20 feet from where we are. And in this group, you have Israeli flags flying, you have Trump 2024 signs, and then you have this gentleman with the megaphone who seems to be speaking the most loudly. Another sign says convict Trump already. So you've really got sort of all sides represented here, Leslie. But I couldn't believe that video when I saw both sides yelling, expletive Biden at each other. What's your takeaway from that, Leslie?
Well, there's a few takeaways. One, although I don't like what they're chanting, it just shows that two sides that are completely different can come together and can agree on something. We see that with Democrats and Republicans, and we're seeing that with this chant. Sorry, okay? One. Two, what I also find, a couple of things. I live in Southern California. I drove by UCLA yesterday. I wanted to see with my own eyes and not trust everybody telling me what I'm seeing, to see for myself. I saw horrific anti-Semitism and anti-Muslim messages. Just disgusting. Here in Southern California, UCLA campus, in California where I live, in the United States, that we have such hatred toward people in both of these religious groups from what I saw with my eyes. And secondly, I would say, be careful what you wish for. The people that are chanting blank Joe Biden, especially those who want a ceasefire, especially those who want a two-state solution, especially those who want to stop giving Israel everything they want, giving them all the money and all the weapons. That's not going to happen with Donald Trump. And if you don't vote for Joe Biden, that is going to be your president, Donald Trump. So I'm very confused if they want to blank Joe Biden, what they think they're going to get if they do.
So let's pull up this disturbing image from George Washington University's campus. It's George Washington, the first president of the United States, and you can see what has been done to him on the campus here, this photo widely circulated. So, Marc, there was a lot of calls for the president to speak to this. And he made his first comments today after, weeks of the White House being pressed and giving their own answers from the press podium. But he finally spoke today. What did you think about what he said?
Well, first on those protesters uniting, Joe Biden promised to put his whole soul in his inaugural address into uniting the country. Joe, you did it. Congratulations is number one. Number two, that picture of that statue just proves these people don't just hate Jews. They don't just hate Israel. They hate America. These are anti-American protests as well as anti-Semitic protests. And Joe Biden, I know Leslie said she saw anti-Islamic signs of some kind. Maybe there are a few here and there. The problem on our campuses right now is not Islamophobia. This is the biggest outbreak of anti-Semitism we have seen in this country's modern history. And for Joe Biden to go out and claim and do the two sides thing that he condemned Donald Trump for and say there's, there are bad people on both sides of this protest is ridiculous. These people are hateful. They are harassing Jewish students. They are shutting down campuses. They are preventing people from graduating. They're preventing Jewish students from accessing the education they paid for. They're yelling at them, go back to Poland. Can you imagine if there were people saying go back to Africa to black students on these campuses? So the problem in these campuses, Leslie, is not anti-Islamophobia. This is an anti-Semitism problem, and everything else pointing to one or two signs over here is just a distraction.
Marc, can I just jump in here,
one
Marc?
of the
A couple of things. One,
yeah,
I'm
sure,
not going to
Leslie.
generalize. That's not the majority. Sorry.
It's the majority of the protests.
Oh, thank you.
Go ahead, Leslie.
That's
Certainly.
not the majority. Marc,
go ahead, Leslie.
Marc, that's not the majority of the protesters on any of these campuses. And by the way, there are numerous Jews that are also pro-Palestinian, are supporting the pro-Palestinian movement and who want a ceasefire in Gaza. And I think it's extremely disingenuous to say that every single Jewish person who's pro-Palestinian is anti-Semitic.
No, I mean, we certainly see divisions within Israel and within Jewish people here in terms of what they support. I don't think, I think most, sane people can say that we need to have peaceful situations in terms of these protests. But, one of the things that I think is going to get a lot of attention here is that the question of law and order. And we keep thinking back to 1968 when Nixon won on a law and order platform, really, when there was so much tumult and anti-Vietnam protesting going on in the country. Here's President Trump shaking hands with Wisconsin law enforcement yesterday. Take a look at this. All right, so you see the former president shaking hands and talking to people. Clearly, Marc, he sees this not only as something that he really has always done, I don't think it's disingenuous, but as an important message for his campaign, given what's going on.
Well, I mean, think about this. So if you look at the 2020 election, a vast majority of Americans said that before the election they were better off now than they were 4 years ago under Trump than they were before he took office. But a lot of people didn't vote for him because they were tired of the chaos. Well, here's the question. Is the chaos worse or better than it was now, than it was 4 years ago? There's chaos on our campuses. There's chaos on our borders. There's chaos in the Middle East. There's chaos in Europe. Biden has unleashed worse chaos than anything Donald Trump had ever done. And so Donald Trump is going to point that out. Donald Trump is actually going to be running as the candidate to return back to normalcy, which is quite ironic if you think about it. So, the chaos is hurting Joe Biden, without a doubt. And it's everywhere.
What a crazy world we live in. I'm thinking about what you're saying, and I'm, sitting here in front of the courthouse where today I watched a former U.S. president sitting at the defendant's desk, and it really didn't sink in until I, saw it on the screen from the overflow room. Really, what's happening here? No matter what you think about what the outcome should be, it's a stunning moment in and of itself. Leslie and Marc, always good to see you. Thank you very much for joining me today.
Thanks, Martha.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.